All right. I almost forgot what button to push there for a second. I was panicking. I was like, oh man, I'm
Under
lost.
pressure. Yeah, yeah.
Under pressure. That's it. Under pressure.
It was cold outside.
Shrinkage? Are we having that conversation again?
No, yeah,
Is that the rumor? I don't know.
yeah.
Well, welcome everybody to another Friday night. And it's this is the
Art and stuff show. I'm Sean Ahrendt, and like big, I'm signing alligators on my shirt. And I'll see you later.
oh
Yeah, I thought of that. Prior.
that's a good one.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
good one.
yeah.
I like that.
And with me as always is my brother, not fucking
Hey, you got to figure out the right way to point, man. You notice how I always get it right now? Because I know. Like, you got to point the opposite direction. I'm the very attractive, very sexy, very distinguished. Always narcissistic, but never vain. A staunch defender of Rob Liefeld, and a lover of all things 90s. Joseph Michael Sonntag, or Joam Sonntag, if you prefer. Or as the Pope likes to call me, JMS. So, welcome. Hey to Anthony Helmer. Is that it? Did I pronounce that right? I'm horrible with
Hey,
that.
Anthony, how you doing? Yeah. Oh, he's awesome. We'll have to have him on one time if
Oh,
he's
there you
got
go.
free
Future
time.
guest.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Future guest of the Ahrendt
phenomenal.
Stuff show.
Uh,
Well, we have a very fun show tonight. I think, as always, because I mean, it's the Ahrendt Stuff show. We always have fun shows
Sure.
here, and it's a good time. But tonight we got a guest on. I think we're gonna be talking about some stuff that's near and dear to my heart, which is gonna titillate my '90s nostalgia. If that's a thing I could put out there, maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna kick it to Sean because Sean's like the hype man here. At least
Yeah, well,
that's the rumor. That's the rumor.
Yeah. Keep
But
going
today,
with that.
tonight,
How's that working out for you?
tonight's gonna be the night. This is
All
gonna
right.
be the one. All right.
Now it's like a Jermaine Dupri song. Great. All right. So he's been in the biz for about 30 years or so. He has crafted some of the most visually exciting and straight up set the blueprint on how to lay out a page, have not only the story flow and tell the story properly, but bring balls to the wall action. He's worked with Marvel, I believe co-created Qnit, co-founded Hyperworks with his own properties, Deity, spin-offs, Cat's Eye and Cosmic Cat. He worked for Extreme, Bloodstrike, Bloodstrike Assassin, Night Strike. Partnered up with MTV for the Me Too project. Also, a book I want to talk about, 88, and the 24-hour comic, Emerald City Blues, that he created on like 24-hour comic day. It takes you a day to do a comic, and if you do it, it's awesome.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah, as well as I'm not done. As well as working in the toy industries, and if you have kids or a man-child like myself, you have some of his stuff around. So, and he's also an artistic ninja. So, without further ado, bring up Karl.
What up, Karl? How you doing?
Hey. Man, what a great intro.
Yeah. Sorry, I stuttered.
was
I was
good,
like Porky Pig.
I was like, that was worth all $5, man.
There you go. Yeah. Next time we're at a con, we'll share nachos.
I'm kicking you down $5 for that. That was real, man.
Right.
Hey, Jojo, welcome to the show. Chauncey Blakely. I think, again, I'm horrible with last names. I'm horrible with names in general. So if I pronounce your name wrong, I am sorry. But thank you, everybody. Welcome to the chat.
How's it going?
Like we say in previous shows, feel free to jump in and ask questions as we go. Be a part of the show because you can spark some really interesting conversations sometimes. Jojo, yeah, I have seen Doom Patrol. Pretty good. I haven't seen season 2 yet, though. I have to check that out.
All right, so let's kick it off. Could you mind going to a brief story of your origin?
Yeah.
Brief.
Yeah.
Well,
So I got my start in comic books. Actually, I did it. I got my first job when I was 17 with an independent comic. And then I started working. It's so weird. I was working at a comic store, and then I was sending my stuff into Marvel all the time. And one of the editors there, a guy named Carl Potts, said, hey, started sending me back feedback. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that someone actually read it and answered me. And I never really thought I would do comic books for a living or any of that. I wanted to teach political science and history. That was like my big dream. And so he said, hey, you should meet up with these other guys, these other artists, And those artists was Jim Lee, Will Spertasio, and Scott Williams. And this is when they were just kind of starting out. So I met with them, and I met with them at the store, and then I met with them later on at WonderCon when it was in Oakland, and they asked me to come down and start working as an assistant for them. So you know the cover of the X-Men issue that has Black Widow, Wolverine, and Captain America on the cover?
Oh, yeah.
That was the first issue I came in on. I came on it towards the end of that. So I worked
Nice.
as an assistant for those guys for quite a few years. And then I did Q Unit. And then from there, I had known Rob. Literally, I'd known Rob Liefeld from when he was like a teenager. I used to see him at shows. And I used to buy little cards from him and stuff like that. He would draw it was really neat stuff. I remember thinking it was, and I remember thinking like, man, he's like a kid like me, but he does it like for a living, you know? But then I got in the industry, and I would see him around from time to time. But after Q Unit, he offered me to come to Extreme and work on a couple different books. And the first book I did for them was Troll 2. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Oh yeah.
But
I got
that was the first time I ever got to really like cut loose and just do what I wanted. Because when I worked at Homage Studios before it became Wildstorm and all that, we were really about grinding out the books. You know, so you wanted to be able to copy the style versus do like, well, I want to develop my own look. It was more about, hey, how can I help you guys hit the deadlines? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great kind of training area because I had gone from sending in samples to being around.
What's up, Bear?
Yeah, that dude's classic. But from being doing samples to being around people who do it for a living, and that's a big jump, you know. And then going from being with those guys to being with the Extreme guys, it was like going from suddenly you're around a much younger group of people, you know. And Rob, I think, really created an environment where people could just go off and try different stuff. He wanted it to be commercial and wanted it to be, people to want to buy it, of course, but he had a certain sensibility. But a lot of guys came out of there, Andy Park, Marat, Chap Yap, Todd Knock, a lot of dudes came out of Extreme, and I think partially because he was so open to letting everybody do what they want. So then, of course, I worked on Bloodstrike, which was kind of a funny thing that happened because it had been this kind of group book.
Yeah.
And Rob said, hey, come into my office. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen pictures of it, but it was almost like we worked in the Baxter building, like the Fantastic Four headquarters. It was this huge skyscraper in Anaheim, and it looked out over the Angel Stadium. And so Rob's thing was like these huge windows. He went in there, and he had this little piece of tracing paper, and on the tracing paper was this guy wearing a mask, and he said, "This is Bloodstrike," and I'm like, "Is the whole team in there? Is it like it's something that I didn't get where he was going with it." He goes, "It's just going to be a single character now," and I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And so he let us jump from there and just kind of take off from that main concept that he had, it was really fun to do that because there wasn't a whole lot being at that point. Most of the Image books had launched as team books other than like Spawn and, but the main studios all had a lot of team books, and team books are actually really difficult to draw. So working on Bloodstrike for me was great because it's like, you spend most of your time just drawing like shells, like bullet shells, and lots of shine and lots of gear and pouches and so forth. So I did that, and then after Extreme kind of died down, I started my own publishing, which was Hyperworks, and I did the comic book Deity, and I did that with Robert Napton, co-created that with him, and we did quite a few different books, and that book was really defining for me because it was doing something that was so different than Bloodstrike, artistically and story wise. And then that's where I really learned the ropes of running a publishing company, which is, if I thought I knew a lot about the comic business, but I don't think you really understand it until you get into the publishing side, where you see what really motivates people, because your real customer in terms of in the mainstream comic industry is the comic book store, not so much the comic book reader. So you have to sort of get them to get behind your book and then get the readers behind your book, you know? So it's like, it's two layers of marketing and learning that goes with that. So kind of in between that time, I did a lot of work for the Disney Imagineers. And that's when I got into doing kind of stuff that was where you're taking a concept and you know it's going to be made into a physical object. And that kind of learning that I got from doing that is what really helped me get into the toy industry, which the toy industry is interesting because it's like an intersecting kind of point in the sense that you're doing some drawing, you're doing some thought in terms of how it's going to be applied to a physical object, like how your designs are going to be translated into something that people can hold and so forth. But it's also something where you're thinking about who's going to buy this, which kid is going to buy this, why are they going to buy it? Is it because it's a TV show? Is it because nostalgia? Is it because it's an intersection of a lot of different skill sets. And for me, it worked out perfect that I'd had some kind of training in the different areas, so they kind of came together. So that's my origin story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's awesome, man.
Hey,
What's up, Jimmy?
Reyes.
See you. Chauncey says those Bloodstrike covers are gold, especially issue 21.
That's my favorite cover.
Yeah, I would highly agree with that one. Second that, definitely. Those like I said, the Bloodstrike run that you did was awesome. That's where I discovered you personally, artistic wise, and I loved it. I loved everything that you guys were doing with that book, and you know the feel of the book was great. The action scenes were great. Like Sean said, the layout of the book was awesome. It was definitely a nostalgic thing for me to think back of all those issues. Sorry, I'm trying to read the chat and talk. Sometimes my brain.
No worries, man.
Hey, Mikey.
Hey, how's it going, Mike? Mike Mott said, "Did you ever sculpt the toys, or just drew them out?"
Well, I usually do detailed turns, which is the front, the back, the side, top, bottom. So I kind of know what they're going to look like when they get sculpted. But recently, I've been taking a ZBrush class. So I'm hoping to move into doing straight sculpting with stuff. Also, hopefully original concepts and all that. It definitely, there's some elements of it that are similar to what you do in drawing in terms of you're creating something in a space where you're in your mind, you're imagining how like, oh, here's the hand, here's the, how it all fits in space.
Right.
But it's more the interface is what you need to learn. You know how it is, like, I don't know if you guys use Photoshop or any kind of programs like that, but when you know how it is when you first get it, it's learning how to make the app do what you want it to do. And that's what I found with 3D already, is once you get the basic concepts down, it's more like refining, hey, how do I get it to do exactly what I want it to do?
Right. El Guapo said issue 21 was a beast. So I think there's a good consensus that 21 was the shit.
Is that the one that Jeremy owns the cover to with
Yeah.
I've held that in my hands. That is fucking beautiful. Like just to feel like the line work on it. Jesus Christ.
What's so funny about that cover is I had a couple different ideas for covers, and I came in on I think a Friday, and Friday was payday, like in the Extreme era, and so and Rob was always in on Fridays, so if you had to ask him something and you wanted to get paid, that was your day to do it. So and God bless that guy, because honestly, I mean, he could have just done his own thing and been totally fine. But the fact that he employed so many artists to do stuff and gave us an opportunity to develop our chops while we were getting paid. Like, I mean, we were getting paid more than Marvel artists at the time. And it was outrageous for our ability level compared to what the market value was.
Sure.
So, hey, bless him for doing that. He was great about that. But in that particular cover, I came in and I showed him like a couple different ideas, and he was just like, that one. And it was the one with the gun. And I blew it up on a copy machine, and I started drawing. Took me about an hour and a half to draw it. Like, so no time at all for a cover.
Really?
Right? Yeah, It was super fast because it was really just drawing the gun kind of, you know what I mean? And then they gave it to Marlo, and then Marlo turned around and just he inked the hell out of it, man. I mean, he really made that piece come to life. Marlo Alquiza, he was one of the extreme inkers, and man, he was fantastic. He did a lot of my stuff on Bloodstrike. And if you look at the original, you can see all the detail that he put in there in terms of the shine and all that stuff. So he even did like little tiny pieces of the gun that looked like they'd been chipped, or you know, where the screws fit in and stuff like that. So I give all the credit to him in terms of bringing that piece to life. And then, man, when they colored it, that really blew it out. So honestly, I only can take credit for about an hour and a half of the work. There's a lot of people that really killed it, made it happen.
I got a high res of that scan if you want me to send it your way. Jeremy always had me scan up all his pages, so I got like a collection of some awesome shit. Like, I'm like, yeah, Jeremy, get that double page spread for Rob. Yeah. You deserve it. You know?
Yeah.
It's in my files.
It's funny that you mentioned the pay rate at Extreme. I don't know if you listened to Rob's podcast, Robservations, but that's one of the things he's kind of talked about is how he wanted to pay everybody top dollar more than the industry was paying back then in the 90s, and how he even pay rookies, hundreds of dollars a page, which was like over what Marvel or DC was paying everybody. So that, that really does show like a very generous streak in the dude to, one, develop so many artists. Because that's another thing that I've heard him talk about on his podcast was when he did Extreme, he was definitely trying to find and develop new talent. Unlike when he did Awesome or something else, where he was like trying to do more just established stuff and move on. But Extreme definitely was like, find that new talented guy, give him a chance, put him out there, get a name for himself. So a lot of you guys came through Extreme and did, I mean, a lot of you guys made a hell of a name for you guys. And when you talk about industry, what you guys did after, the things that you got into. So it is really remarkable when you look at that roster of Extreme guys. It's pretty incredible.
And you guys are still sought after, like Jeff Matsuda, like the guy's top tier in like the animation business. Like it's crazy to go back to those stories, and you're like, here I was as a kid enjoying them, and then you grow up and you're like, you guys are like the Titans, like you're doing all this awesome work. It's like, again, like you working on toys, you're almost in everybody's house one way or another. And also like your mark is there. And like Jeff's got the cartoons and what have you. It's fucking awesome. It's like the Yankees going on a tour around the world. You don't be like, we're the Yankees, and you're like, we're the Yankees, but we're the Yankees. I don't know. Or Lakers, because you're a Laker guy.
Yeah.
So.
El Guapo says, I love it when pencilers give inkers love, elbow cough.
Right.
They definitely need it, though, because a lot of times they get lost in the overall picture and all the credit goes to the artist, which as an artist, I'll take it. But inkers do a hell of a lot, too. So,
I mean, especially in that era, I mean, that was the thing, is if you could find someone that you could pair with, especially somebody that maybe had knowledge that you didn't have. Like maybe they were better at lighting, maybe they were better at rendering, maybe they knew how to fix your hands, or maybe they could add a little bit more to your expressions on the faces and stuff. I went through that. Do you guys know Victor Olazaba? He used a lot of Humberto Ramos' stuff on Spider-Man.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So I knew Danny Miki. Danny Miki grew up about 2 blocks from my house.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so he and I worked at the same comic book store. So when I started, and he went to high school with my cousin, so I knew Danny from way back, right? Like he was from where I was from. And so he was an assistant to Art Thubert, and then he went to work for Rob, and obviously the stuff they did together was amazing. And then Danny's had a fantastic career. So when I was starting Hyperworks, originally I was thinking about inking it myself, and I tried a couple other people, but he told me, hey, I reached out to Danny. I said, hey, do you know anybody who's coming up that's good or whatever? And so he told me about this cat Victor, and I was like, all right, cool. So I drove all the way out to his house, his cousin's house, which was like about an hour and a half from where I live. And so I'm half Mexican, but my Spanish is not that great.
Yeah,
but his cousin would translate for me. So I talked to him a little bit, and then the next day, I think I picked him up at the bus station downtown, and he came down to my studio, and he started inking stuff. And I'd seen his samples. I was like, man, this dude is like so underrated. Like, how come no one knows about this dude, right? And so, you know, when you're first starting out with an inker, I'm sure a lot of pencilers will tell you, like, you're always nervous about them inking your faces because they may not catch the nuance that you're trying to get, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I told Victor, I said, okay, I'll ink the faces, okay? And he was like, yeah. And so we'd sit there for hours working because we had our tables like right next to each other in my studio space. And then so one day I came in and all the faces were inked. This was like about a week after working with each other. All the faces were inked. And I didn't even say anything to him. I was just like, I guess he's made the choice for us. he switched over to inking the faces. Yeah. And it was great working with him. He worked with me all through my deity stuff. And he's a fantastic talent. Really talented dude. But yeah, he's the one who decided we were moving on. And I was just, all right, let's do it.
Take it.
Yeah, I think it's always for me being a penciler. I mean, I can ink my own stuff too, but I always, if I get a chance to work with a really good inker, I would like that to see what they can bring out of my work. But it is kind of a nerve-wracking thing to me, and it's probably just because I don't have as much experience working with a lot of inkers as, you know, some of the guys in the business. It's just kind of more normal. But anytime someone new wants to ink my work, it is kind of nerve-wracking because I wonder what it's going to look like when it comes back, and because you know it's your baby, the pencil work. You know, that's what you produce. You know, so to have somebody do something over it, it's, you know, it definitely takes some getting used to, especially when I know like what I can do when it comes to inking my own stuff. But working with a great inker, I think is the most satisfying thing when you get something back and you can see you see your style and you can see what they added to it. Yeah. And it's just like the overall look is just like, oh man, that's perfect. That's awesome. You know, that's exactly what I was hoping for, kind of thing.
Well, you know, the thing about inkers that like I've heard people talk about, you know, there was that old joke, oh, the inker's a tracer.
Right, yeah.
You know, right, like the old Kevin Smith thing and all that.
Yeah.
But all the best inkers are the dudes that can draw.
Yeah.
Because I really don't think an inker is a like qualified inker unless he can draw. Because really all he's doing is he's taking what you've drawn. And if you remember back in the day, right, people used to draw like way looser. Like it was only in the 90s when people started penciling super, super, super tight. And I think that had more to do with the fact that a lot of the people coming into the industry, their main learning source was the comics. So they would look at the comics and be like, oh, they were looking at ink versions that were super tight. And that's how they wanted their pencils to look. But I still have this belief that even though because of digital and all that stuff, it's changed a lot. But if you can find an inker that complements you, you almost create a third artist, which is how you and the inker and your combined look. I mean, you saw this to go all the way back, you know, like a Byrne and a Terry Austin, or Scott Williams and Jim Lee, and you know, Frank Miller and Klaus Janson. You have somebody, and what's interesting in all three of those cases, you've got inkers that are actually pretty. They have a style, like a really definitive style, where it's not like they're just like, hey, I'm going to make it look like the way John Byrne inks when he inks himself. There's a specific look when Byrne and Austin were inking each other. Same thing. So it's like, that's where I'm saying that third artist sort of emerges, you know, where it's the combination of both the people.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I mean, absolutely, I agree. Got a question from the chat. Or I'm sorry, Sean, go ahead. I'll read this question.
No, I was gonna say, like, again, like the third artist thing. Like, my favorite artist is when Todd inks Rob, because that's something. You got Rob's foundations, and then you got Todd's noodleness. You know, like his cool shit, and like that's a different artist within itself. That's beautiful.
Especially in that era of Rob's artwork, it was pretty angular.
Yeah,
you know, and I think it had a very Terry Austin influence to it. That look, that sort of angular look. But like you said, Todd's work is very organic looking. So when they would mesh together, man, it was legit.
Yeah, that's for sure.
The cable, the classic cable, well, all the Numian stuff that they did over each other.
Yeah.
Actually, my favorite book in that period of time with them was the one where they did the side issue with Juggernaut and Spider-Man.
Oh yeah.
That
was the first book I tried to emulate doing like layouts. Like, I folded my piece of paper in half, took my number 2 pencil. I'm like,
Yeah.
let me try to draw this. Sucked, but it was the first effort.
Yep.
Hey, no first effort ever sucks.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get back to Chauncey's question real quick, but a comment Carl said, or Aquapo said, Carl, you're so right. Now with these tight pencils, it takes away from what an inker can do artistically, and I think that's true to a point. I mean, I still think there's something that an inker can add to even tight pencils, but it's a little bit. I would say a lot of the inkers I've talked to like something a little bit more loose because it gives them something to play with. That's one thing I've kind of learned over the last few years with really trying to work with various inkers.
Well, also too, it's kind of like, it depends on what inker you have, because there's certain inkers that are kind of almost like finishers. You know what I mean? Like you could give them a pretty loose layout. Like, for example, if you gave Scott Williams just like a breakdown, he could probably make it look pretty close to, like, if you did a layout, he could make it happen. You just need, it just depends on what you want that relationship to be like. Do you want them to be a big say in that final art? I mean, the joke has always been, well, how important is the inker? Well, he's the one who puts down the line you see.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you think about it, inking came from a limitation in printing, right? They needed clean line art in order to, print the material. And then it became, in the Barry Windsor Smith era and all that kind of stuff, it became more illustrative. And then it went from being where it was printable line art to being illustrated line art. And then now, when it's in this era, you'll see a lot of cats will just do the most basic thing in, pencil and ink, scan that in, and then do all kind of textures over it. Or some of the guys I've seen recently, they'll just do a super loose layout and go in and start doing the finished artwork in digital inking form. Which, if you think about it, why would you do a fake pencil inside of a computer when you could just do a fake pen and make it look the same? You know what I mean?
Right.
Why would you choose to do that? Like, it's more like you're tricking your mind into believing it's the pencil.
Yeah, that's true.
I found out it's like, I'll go back and forth from doing like layouts on the iPad or like little pieces of paper.
Yeah.
But my stuff is more looser on the reel. But once I if I start digital, it's stiff because I'm fixing all the nuances. I'm trying to make it perfect. Yeah. But if I do that with the original art, it doesn't look as stiff, regardless of how many times I could mess with whatever or do a lasso to change this, So there's still that element that makes it lively.
Well, to that point, I remember quite a few years ago, I would always think like, oh, you do a sketch, say you did it like you're talking about, you did a doodle on a Post-it, or you did something in your sketchbook and you're like, oh, that has the right energy. I want that in the final piece. So I would, back in the day, I would scan that and then I'd bring that into the computer and do whatever. But then I saw one time this guy did a sketch and then he just took out his phone and he took a picture of it and he's like, I'm going to use this. And I was like, oh, what are you doing, man? I was all crazy, right?
Exactly.
And that was just like the showing my years right there.
Yeah.
People have, in terms of making their art, they have a lot less boundaries, which I actually think is fantastic. It's ultimately, when the viewer sees it for the first time, that's the response you're looking for.
Right.
They don't need to know what happened behind it unless you feel that's part of sharing it. But nowadays, I think a lot of people share that stuff because they're like, oh, well, this just creates more content for me. And this is something that I can leverage to build interest in what I'm doing. So I'm going to show you how I do layouts. I'm going to show you how I digitally inked it. I'm going to show you how I colored it. And I'm going to have 3, 4, 5 videos that just come from the process.
That's what I do.
Yeah,
I need
that's
those likes
a dope way
on
to do
Instagram.
it. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
I think you're just leveraging your time. I mean, I got a friend of mine. Yeah. You guys know Jeremy Burley.
Yeah.
He's a good friend of mine. He's a writer artist, and he tells me he literally he's got a camera above his table, and anytime he does anything, he always records his screen. He always records anything he's drawing, no matter what it is. And I'm like, man, doesn't that get crazy after a while? It's like you never have a moment where you're just by yourself with the artwork. And he's like, oh, no, man, it's all content. I can decide what I want to show, but I know I have it all cataloged. And I was like, wow. Yeah. I don't know if I'm that deep with it yet. I still like having those moments where it's just me and the art.
Yeah.
I'm an artist. You know,
Right,
get
I'm
that
an
one.
artist. Look at me by myself.
Question from the chat from Chauncey Blakely, which I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. So, looking at what you've created in the past, would you change anything today? Why or why not?
That's an interesting question. I went through a period of time, which I think every artist goes through, where you look back at your old stuff and you're like, oh, I hate this, I hate that about it. But I say it's similar to, you know, when you look at like your prom photo from high school when you're in your early 20s and you're like, look at how stupid I was. But then when you're like 30 or 40, you look back at it and you go, you were so beautiful. You know what I mean? So I look at that with the artwork that I've created back in the day, and I say, I appreciate it for what it was, and I appreciate it for the effort that I was putting into it at the time. I was not holding back. It wasn't like I had some extra, you know, level that I could have gone to. I was doing the best I could at the time, so I don't have any regrets about that. It's just, you know, I look at it and I'd be like, oh, damn, I wish I'd have fixed that hand or that foot or something crazy like that. But,
Right.
you know, it is what it is. And, you know, I've learned that once you make something, it kind of goes out there into the world and people, they own it. The world owns it. You don't really own it anymore. You did your part. And now people see it and they get out of, you know, they get a lot out of it. And that's the best part of it, is when you see something you create and someone else likes it. That's, I mean, for me, that's why I do it.
Yeah.
You know, because if you do it for, like I always hear artists go, I'm just doing it for myself. I'm all, well, then why do you post it?
True.
Like,
Right.
why would you show it? Why would you
That's a good
publish
point.
it if you're just doing it for yourself? You know,
Yeah.
it's about, I think for most people, it's about the connection that comes when someone sees your art.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I had this past year, my wife and my daughter and I, we went to France and we saw the Mona Lisa, right? And
Oh, nice.
and I'd seen it before, so I knew that it wasn't as big as you imagine it to be, right? But when people see it for the first time and they're actually in the presence of the artwork, it changes their relationship with the artwork. And that's what I feel, not to compare the Mona Lisa to comics, but they are all art, you know? So when you're making it, you're creating artwork and it's this big, huge 11 by 17 piece of paper. But when the person who's buying it gets it, it's this much smaller comic book. So their relationship to the art is tactile. You know,
Right.
they're picking it up off the stands, or they're receiving it in the mail. They're taking it out of the bag. There's a ritualistic element to how they're, you know, viewing your artwork for the first time. I'm like that. Like when I get a comic book, I'm like, oh, check out that cover. Oh, that logo looks dope. Oh, and then I'm like, oh, the paper feels a certain way. And y'all know when you've opened up a comic and you smelled it.
Oh,
You
yeah.
ever done it, right?
Oh,
and you're like, oh, that
absolutely.
sweet printed magazine smell. How dope.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, and you're enjoying it. But it's a whole sensory kind of thing. And I think that's something that when you're a creator, you don't really experience it as much as the person who experiences your artwork in that form does. You know, their experience is a total immersive experience, where yours is like, oh, I remember this eye that I drew off, you know. So you're relating to it in a much different way.
That's that actually kind of reminds me when I was talking to the lead singer of Hell Yeah, Chad Gray, one day, and they had just released a song, and I was telling him that this is what I thought the song was about based on the lyrics, and he kind of said something just similar to what you did. He said, "Hey, that song is your guys now." He's like, "Whatever you want the song to be is what it is now." He's like, "You know, I wrote it, and how you interpret it is how you interpret it. You know, enjoy it." You know, it's kind of like when you look at art in general, that's kind of what it is. You know, we create it, but the relationship the audience is going to have with it is completely different than we're going to have with it, and they might like it for a completely different reason than we do. You know, and they might see some of the stuff we see, and feel a certain way, and they feel something completely different from it. So I think I'll say this before, like music and art to me is very similar, and I've been in both mediums, so to speak. So I can see a lot of the nuances when it comes to the audience enjoying what you produce, you know, physically and emotionally for them, you know.
It's funny you say that, because I've had people come up to me and be like so into pointing out stuff that bothered them. Like they'll be like, let me show you this, and then they'll be like, why did you do this, or why did this happen, or this, and all that. And I'm like, damn, bro, I can't remember, dude. That was like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Like, I don't know, you know. I mean, it was a Tuesday night 25 years ago. I don't know what made me go this way or that way with it. But for them, it's taken on a significance because they're seeing it within that context, right? Which is, I think, the same thing. I remember I can't remember which artist, which musician said it, but they were talking about how people would come up to them and say, "Oh, your lyrics changed my life," and then they would sing the lyrics to them, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's not what it was. That's not those weren't the lyrics at all." And then the musician was like, "I never told them that their lyrics were wrong because I didn't want to screw up the song for them."
Right. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's why, like, when someone shows you a comic book like that you did, and you just happy that they are still getting something out of it, you don't want to be like, yeah, it sucks or what have you, you know. Trying to think who was the guy who did trying to think of the artist. He used to do role-playing game stuff. Because years ago, I'll find his name and let you guys know, but he was telling me when I first started out, people would show me something that I worked on, and I would be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I hate that." And then he would tell me, he's like, "Man, you know how depressed that dude looked when he left? You just he showed you something he enjoyed, and you told him it sucked." And I was like, wow, that really gives me some context and made me realize that's not the way to go.
Sure.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely.
It's like a time capsule.
Yeah. Because, funny story, right? When I first got married, my wife went to a convention with me, and she'd never been to like a comic show or whatever. So she was just like, I don't know what's going on here, whatever. And this dude came up, and he looked straight out of like Duck Dynasty. He had like the crazy like beard, looked like ZZ Top style, whatever. And so he comes over and he says, "Can I give you a hug?" And at first I was like, okay, So he gives me a hug and he goes, "I read your comic book when I was 13 years old." And this dude looked like he'd had a couple rough days. And so he walks away, and my wife says, she goes, "Wow, you are so old." Because if that dude read your comic when he was 14.
Oh, man. See, that could have been like this like really nice like story of how you impacted somebody's life, but she just I guess that's marriage,
That's part of life. You got to take the good ones with the bad ones.
All right, Mike, you have a good one.
I'm going to ask you a question here in 2 seconds, but before I do, Chauncey said I got the first name right. So I'm thinking I messed up the last name by saying Blake Lee because I'm dyslexic, and I probably is it Blakey? Blake? Like context. Give us some context in the chat. Do you like the dictionary thing and just like spell it out?
Like
yeah. That? So anyway, to Mike's question, let me find it here. He said, "What was your favorite character to draw from Marvel overall?"
Well,
Evan?
Evan.
Oh, hey, Evan. So yeah, when I was a kid, I loved drawing X-Men characters because that was the main comic I read. So when I got a chance to be a part of that was like unbelievable to be able to be a part of making the comics. I still to this day I love drawing Wolverine.
Sure.
Probably the Hulk. I still like drawing the Hulk. I actually like drawing Venom a lot because it's like so fun. It kind of reminds me of like the alien from the Alien movies where it's got the crazy mouth and all that stuff. And you can kind of, as long as you keep him bulky, you can do a lot of interesting stuff with him.
Yeah, with the sheet, interpretate that.
Yeah.
But I can tell you mine of yours that you drawn. Super Skrull.
Oh.
I love that. I love that pinup, man. I was like finding like the Holy Grail kid. I'm like, yes, because Super Skrull is my favorite villain character. I remember reading my dad's FF18 before his Amazing Fantasy 15. So I seen the cartoons. I'm like, I get the gist. But like, Super Skrull is everything. Like, I love the FF. I think that was, cool powers, all in one villain. You can't go wrong.
Yeah.
And you drew it dope.
What's that?
And you drew it dope.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I was going to say that one of the first comics I read, and it made me think about it, what you said, is my aunt, I used to go to Ohio when I was a kid because that's where my dad's from. And my aunt gave me a bunch of back in the day, people used to just keep stacks of old comics around. So she gave me like a stack of these old comics. And the comic that was first on the top was a reprint of that Fantastic Four issue, The Thing Runs Amok.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, do you guys remember that?
I remember that.
Anyhow, that was one of the first comics I ever read. And I remember reading it and thinking like, oh man, it would be so fun to draw these characters. And the first comic I ever started drawing from, you know how when you first get a comic, you want to draw all the characters in it, was Contest of Champions.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Remember this?
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe it was like a long time ago, but it was like John Romita Jr. did it, Bob Layton inked it. Yeah, it was just because it had all the characters from all over the world. It was all, you know, for whatever reason as a kid, that made me go, wow, that's like so amazing.
What's one tool that you've used in your life? Let's say like younger in your career, and you're like, where was this many years ago? Would there be a certain type of nib or a certain type of brush, or you're like whiteout?
Yeah.
Great.
That's real quick before you answer that. So a little clarity on that. So I added an extra L on the last part of his name. So I'm thinking it's Blake. Tell me if that's closer to being right. And I know he's got another question. We'll ask that after Sean's question. Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to bring a good clarity on last names on this show so we don't butcher everybody.
Hey, you got to keep it correct, man.
Yeah, try to.
Well, when I was coming up, there was not a ton of different inking tools. I mean, there were like, even the markers back then were kind of crappy. And basically, you either use a Croclo or you use rapidograph. You guys all remember rapidographs back in the day?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, but now, man, oh my God. I mean, the amount of brush pens, the markers are amazing. I mean, you can ink a whole book so much quicker now than you could back in the day, just because you have so many different tools that you can deal with. I wish we had all that stuff back in the day. It would have made life a lot easier.
And it's more convenient to get.
Yeah, and then also too, have you seen like the rise of people wanting to draw manga has really brought out the amount of different type of comic book making tools. I mean, the amount of nibs that you can get now versus back in the day, it's staggering. I'd say about a year and a half ago, I inked an entire piece with using the deleter Crocles, you know, and these things are great. They bend really easy. They don't break. They hold the ink really well. No dripping, none of that stuff. And I was like, man, where were these? Like back in the day, man, it would have made life a lot easier. It have probably extended the careers of all these inkers, you know?
Right. That's what Dan said he was using, right, Joe? Is the leaders?
I think so, yeah. And
Chauncey Blakey.
Yeah. He said, you're good, just say my first name. Apparently, I mean, I'll never get it right then. We'll just go with Chauncey.
Joe, you suck.
I suck. Oh, my God. You can never get it right. But he did have a question. He said, do you do anything special to get your creative juices flowing? Please explain.
Wow. Well, it's weird because, you know, I have kids. So whenever I have free time.
Carl got it. Blakey.
When you have kids and you get free time, you don't really get a whole lot of ramp up. You got to just be like, okay, I got free time to draw, you know? Sure. So I really got into that thing of being able to, hey, I got the free time, I got to do it. You know, I try to get the most out of that. So I don't have like a ritual. I still look at I have a huge art book collection and I'll look at that. I still play music while I draw. Nowadays, the hardest thing for me to do is stay in the same place for an extended amount of time. Like when I was younger, for whatever reason, I could just be like, I'm going to work 8 hours straight of just drawing. Right. Now I'm like, I have to put on a show in the background. So Netflix, like to me, I'll see an episode of Netflix a couple years later and on some whatever show, and I'd be like, I don't remember any of this. I just remember the dialogue because I don't really watch it. It's just playing in the background, right. You know? So it's kind of cool when I can get something that entertains me because at the point I'm at right now, when I draw something, it's not really super engaging because I've already done, once you do the layout, for me at least, you've kind of done the hard work. You figured out, you know, the how the figure is going to work, you know, how the costume is, whatever. Really, when you're just transferring over to pencils or even inking, it's a little like calming. It's sort of like you're zoning out a little bit. So having something playing in the background actually helps me focus.
Yeah, I
Now,
found
do you think that that's like kind of like tightened your game a bit? Like instead of be like, I need to be inspired to, I gotta get it done.
Well, so I mean, over the years, I've worked with a lot of different pros, you know, and I've
Yeah.
seen like how a lot of different guys work. And the biggest thing that I've noticed between the guys that could do it, and then the guys that were good, and then the guys that were great, were the guys that could bring it every day. You know, that they could activate on a high level whenever they felt like it. Not, I mean, not whenever they felt like, whenever they had to, which is,
right.
I guess, the best way to say it. So, like, I think that that's the difference between people that do it professionally and do it really successfully, is that they can generate that inspiration just by being the act of doing it. You know, because I mean, we all go through points of like where we slump, you know, where you're
Yeah.
like, I don't really feel like doing it or whatever. And then that's when you maybe need to dig a little bit deeper and find some inspiration or whatever. But I got to tell you, after I look at like 2 or 3 comics or something, I'll look at it and be like, damn, that's awesome. I want to go do that. You know what I
Right.
mean? Or if I'm looking at what's out there, or like I look at Pinterest all the time. I have all these different subfolders of Pinterest, you know, and I'll look at those and I'll be like, oh wow, that's inspiring. Oh man, that's amazing. You're looking at
Yeah.
the cream of the crop, so it's kind of messing with your head. You're like, oh my
Sure.
god, it was all created in the same day at the same moment. You know, it really wasn't. It was years and years of people working. But at the same time, I look at that and I'll go, wow, man, I really want to go make something.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, because I've got I have a full-time job and I have a full-time family. So finding the time to get to my drawing table and work on my book sometimes can be a challenge. And even sometimes when you're like, I've got that time, sometimes you're just crazy beat. And you know,
Yeah,
it's a hard mentality to try to drag yourself, well, for me, downstairs to my studio and start working, especially if it's late at night. You know, I'm like, man, I gotta get
yeah,
up to work in 8 hours, so I can only actually be down here for a certain amount of time. So it's it, I find the times when I force myself to do it is actually kind of productive, and I do something that's pretty good. There are other times when it's like, all right, I haven't had a few days to work on anything because I've been so busy. I need to get downstairs. I'm setting a block of time aside, and I go down there and I sit in front of my table, and then
yeah,
nothing good comes out, you know. And it's like sometimes trying to balance that, like you said. I mean, the really top guys can just do it whenever and produce quality. You know, I'm trying to get to that point, and I can definitely say I'm not there just yet. You know, because I go through too many times where I struggle to get out what I want to get out, especially if I don't keep that consistency. And that's what I've noticed is consistently doing it. You know, I keep on my game. So it's an interesting back and forth.
yeah. I mean, everything you just said there is, and that's real talk. I mean, that's what a lot of creative people go through. I guess to be clear about what I was talking about is when you're doing it for a living, and you got to go in and you got to be like,
Mm,
come in and they tell you, hey, 9 a.m. you got to make this stuff,
got
right?
you.
That's a certain level of inspiration. But
Sure.
like, for example, I'll go and work making toys and doing all this, and you know, doing the toy stuff is probably, if I was completely honest, it's about 10% creativity and 90% managing the how the toy gets made. So you're
Gotcha.
not really spending a ton of time drawing all the time. You're spending most of the time making sure that it comes in at the right price. You're making sure that it
Mm,
works with the licensor. So it's a lot of detail oriented, moving little parts, right? So I go through the same thing you go through. I'll come home, you know, the kids will eat dinner. I'll talk to them. They'll go to bed, and that's, you know, that's always like herding cats, right? You know, trying to get them to go to sleep. And then you're just like, oh shit, it's 10:30 at night, and I got to get up in the morning and get them ready for school and do all that. And then you're like, how, you know, should I invest this moment of trying to do it? And for me personally, and for quite a few other artists I've talked to, is just do it. Even if you do it for 10 minutes, even if you do it for 30 minutes, because it's like a setup pitch in baseball, right? You
Hmm.
do it, and then you get up in the morning and you put in another half hour. But that
mm,
10 minutes you spent the night before set you up to really kill it for that 30 minutes the next morning. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's like, if you
yeah.
have the time, even if you don't think you're really making progress, you're getting into the mental space.
Right.
You're thinking about what your next move is going to be. You're thinking about setting up your next play, your next pitch. What are you going to do? Like, for example, I'll give you a great example. The other night, I was tired as shit. I was just like, I want to go to bed. I'm done. Right. I spent a whole day working on this stuff, but I had done these layouts and I wanted to print them out. But I was like, because I was going to print them out, and I decided for this particular thing, I wanted to transfer them over. Right. And I was like, man, I'm just so tired. I don't want to do it. I went ahead, I scanned them, I cropped them, I printed them out. And then the next morning when I got up, I was just like, oh, hell yeah, I'm just, they're already set up. And I really didn't spend that much time. I spent maybe 20 minutes or something putting all this together. But the next morning, knowing that I could just jump right into it, set me up to kind of do it. You know what I mean? Sure. So I think anytime you can put into something that you care about and something that you want to make, you should do it. Even if you're just staring at it, at least you can be thinking about, hey, when I have more time, I'm going to do this, or when next time I'm here at the board, this is my next move,
Right. That's great. No, that's great advice. I'm gonna have to keep that in mind next time, because sometimes I'll get discouraged if I come down here for an hour at the end of the night because I'm just trying to cram in some work so that I can say that, hey, I'm progressively working on stuff. Then I don't achieve anything I wanted to achieve. Sometimes I take it as a failure, and it's almost like an emotional letdown that I'm leaving my table and there's nothing that I am happy with, So, but I mean, that the way you just put that makes a lot of sense. I think I'm gonna try to start looking at it like that, setting up your next pitch kind of thing. That's some good advice.
You guys know Ray Bradbury, the author?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he wrote The Martian Chronicles. He's a real famous sci-fi writer from back in the day. And he had this thing that he would say, he goes, in the morning I throw up on the typewriter and at night I clean it up. So I look at it that way with art. Like sometimes, if you draw something and you're like, oh, that turned out like shit, it doesn't really look good or whatever, that's the throw up, right? But then when you come back at it, you've gone away, you've done some other stuff, you come back and suddenly you go, oh, I know exactly what I want to fix now. But if you had not done that moment where you felt like, oh, I'm uncomfortable with this, if you're feeling uncomfortable when you look at it, that's probably a good sign, because that means your mind already knows what you should change. You just have not done the actual changes yet. So a lot of artists, I think, interpret that as like, oh man, I didn't do this correctly, or it's a negative. But it really is just your brain already knows that there's something amiss. You just need the time and the opportunity to fix it. Because really, ultimately, that's art. It's micro choices. You're making little choices and little fixes. And I mean, I can tell you a lot of the artists that I've seen that were really great artists, the time they spent changing things was just out of control. I mean, they just had that endurance to keep fixing it. And that's where I think a lot of artists sometimes they get frustrated with, they see a mistake and they're like, should I fix it? Should I not fix it? Should I punish myself because I did it wrong the first time? And you really shouldn't. You should be excited that you saw it, because now you know what to do,
Yeah, that's a really good point. Chauncey said, yeah, there's a video where Mark Sylvester says most of the drawing is when you don't want to do it. He said that he told that to a lot of top cow artists. I think I've seen that video. But yeah, I mean, that's all really, it's all really good advice. I mean, a lot of times it's just trying to get over your own head, your own what's the word, procrastination. Procrastination is horrible for creative people, because I can be sometimes extremely motivated to do something, but then there'll be that some little excuse of why I don't do it. Like you said, Carl, like, oh, I'm really tired. I got to get up for work in 6 hours, tomorrow, tomorrow would be the day. And so sometimes that's the things that you really got to fight to get past. What's up, LA? You must be saying hi to Jimmy Reyes, who I don't know if he's still watching, but what's up, Jimmy? Good to see you, man. Thank you for checking out the show. Evan Morris says, I discovered Carl's Saint Angel from a comic bundle at Spirit Halloween back in 2017.
Nice.
Word.
Happy Halloween.
Yeah.
He got it. I don't even think he had to say trick or treat. That's pretty cool.
So what I wanted to get into, before we let you go, because we're taking up way too much of your time, what makes a great character development, or what's your process in making a character? And like, what is it that you're like, this is cool, this could work, this and all that?
Well, I think it starts with making a choice that every element of what you create is going to reinforce the story.
Mm-hmm.
So if you understand who your story's for and what your story is about, then the character design sort of extends that. And everything should always be pushing you back towards that center, which is, hey, I'm telling a story. Like, for example, if you say, I'm creating something for the YA audience, like young adult, right? Mm-hmm. You say, well, what are kids who are into that? Maybe they're into manga stuff, or maybe they're into anime stuff. Or you may say, oh, I'm trying to hit the same audience that likes the Avengers, or whoever your target audience is, who you want to read this and enjoy it. You say, how do I create something that resonates with them? And then you sort of focus on what I would say is iconography, which is where you say, just by looking at the silhouette of this character, what does it say? When I show you a picture of Mickey Mouse and you see the ears, you instantly look at it and go, oh, it's Mickey Mouse. And then you may think like, oh, I remember seeing a balloon when I was 6 at Disneyland. It may have a higher resonance to you just from seeing the icon of it, right? Mm-hmm. So when you are showing somebody a picture, for example, if I show you Batman and you see the ears, you could see a silhouette of Batman and automatically have a feeling about it, right? So your overall silhouette and iconography needs to relate back to what you want the person who's viewing it or experiencing it to experience, what feeling you want them to have. And then in terms of like details, there's kind of subcategories. There's maybe a specific thing that you want to relate back to the reader. You want them to see symbols that they're going to say, that means a specific thing to me, right? Like, let's just say, for example, you put a mohawk on a character, right? Now, when I was coming up, that meant he was into punk rock, right? But now someone may look at it and be like, oh, that reminds me of a character in Fortnite. Do you know what I mean? So you have to relate to the iconography, not just as you relate to it, but as someone from a different age, or specifically the age that you're making it for, how they'll relate to it. So you're looking for those touchstones, cultural touchstones that are going to make somebody say, oh, I get it. I relate to that. I understand what you're trying to say. It's a shorthand. It's a shortcut. You know, it's like when you see, I used to say this, like a lot of times people get cast in movies, not because of the movie they're in, but the movies they've been in before. So if you've seen a character actor who's in a movie and then suddenly they're in this new movie and they're playing a similar character, they don't have to spend the time getting you up to date. You already kind of know what that dude's about or what that actress is about. You're like, I remember them. They always play the skeezy person or whatever. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So you're kind of doing the same thing, but you're doing it from scratch. You're creating a shorthand to get people to, like, for example, let's just say the character design for Snake Eyes, right? You look at someone like Snake Eyes, it's a very simplistic character design, right? But if you see him standing there and he's got like his Uzi up, right? You say, 1, he's military. 2, he's wearing all black. He's a ninja. He's got a sword, right? And then you say, but he's got a dog. So the guy loves animals. You know what I mean? These are all little pieces that are building his character up to you. And then his mouth is covered. So you may think to yourself, he probably doesn't talk. You know what I mean? He's wearing all black, so he's stealthy. So he's a ninja. So, and you start getting all these words. So if you were to reverse engineer that and say, I want to create a character, I want to create a character design, what you want to do is start writing down the ideas that make you think about that character. So you would say, okay, he's huge. He's like the Hulk. So he's this height. He is likes to work out. So he has these kind of attributes. Then another thing to do is, which coincides with if you're writing a story, is you sort of interview the character. You start learning things about that character. Like, for example, you'd say, what was this character's first date? And you'd say, they never had a first date. They were imprisoned for their first 20 years inside of a castle, let's just say, right?
Right.
So you could write down basically an interview with the character where you ask them all these pertinent questions. And then you get an idea. Well, you'd say, well, they lived in a castle. It was medieval times. They never met anybody until they were in their 20s. They were in darkness all the time, so their skin is pale. So the character builds itself once you start building the character. Does that make any sense?
No,
Yeah,
it does, because when I would create my characters, like when I was younger, I called it like the Voltron template. I had the dude, I had the comedy guy, I had the smart, like it was
Yeah.
a mold, and you kind of, but then you put people's personalities into it, or they did this or whatever, and like it's how I would flesh out the characters, and they're all interchangeable one way or another, but in more or less like the basic building block of them is from that. Is how I kind of thought of the whole making up stuff and whatnot.
Well, I mean that you saw that in Chris Claremont's X-Men. He created the modern. It's been talked about a lot, but he created the modern version of the super team. You had the strong guy, you had the crazy guy, you had the agile guy, you had the woman had amazing powers, you had the leader who had a power that was dealing with some sort of issue, but he was the straight arrow guy. You know what I mean? And you can port that over. I mean, Teen Titans was like that.
Yeah.
I mean, all types of different teams and stuff were built around that kind of trope. You know, those kind of combinations. But I think that the interesting thing is when you can take those combinations and then mix them, you know, rotate them around, find different ways to get so that the person who's reading goes, oh, I get it. That's the strong guy, but he's also the nutso. And then, you know what I mean? It's you mix them up, and that's where I think you start to get some original interaction. And when you get that interaction, that's when you get something that's authentic. And ultimately, I think that's what people who are reading, at least me, I know when I see something that's authentic, that's unique or different, or I feel like that the person who made it really believed in it, that's when I want to read more of it or see more of it.
Right.
Awesome. That makes me feel awesome. Thanks.
Well, we've hit that hour mark, so I'm going to try to clear my throat here. I'm going to say...
Sorry.
Yeah, calm down. Calm down. Before we get out of here, I want to thank everybody that came to the chat and asked questions. We really appreciate that. But
thank you.
Karl, is there anything you want to plug that you're working on right now? And where can people find your work, toys, art, all that kind of stuff? Where can they check you out if they want to?
I think you guys listed most of the links, but people can always follow me on Instagram. I'm hoping to do a Kickstarter for a concept later this year, early next year. I've been planning for a while. So if you guys will have me back during that and let me plug it, that'd be awesome.
Anytime.
Absolutely.
I'd appreciate that.
For sure.
I thank you guys for having me too. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully I didn't bore you to death.
No, not one bit. Thanks for letting me pull the buddy card, because I'm like, he's probably busy, but then I'm like, God, give it a shot. This is a treat for us.
Once I saw the link that you scheduled it, I was like, well, that's it. I'm in. I got to do it now.
All right, cool.
Like he scheduled it. I got to do it. I got to come through for him.
No, we're glad you did, man. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Sean asked some great questions. I've mostly just kind of listened to this episode.
Brag.
Yeah. Go ahead, brag. This is one time, man. But
well, thank you guys.
Definitely, we definitely love to have you back on when you do a Kickstarter or just in general. You're always welcome. We'll schedule it and make sure it happens. Speaking of which, sorry. Okay, I'm good. A little bit of news on the Ott and Stuff show. So November 6th, we are going to create a brand new channel that's just going to be the Ott and Stuff channel on YouTube. So we're going to combine everything we're doing to one channel, so it's a little bit easier to find. For anybody listening and watching on Facebook, that means we are going exclusively to YouTube. So I'm putting that out now that everybody has a nice month or so, month and a half, 2 months to see. No, LA, it's not COVID. It's allergies, but thank you.
You're right. Everybody asks.
But I'm just putting that out there right now so everyone knows. Eventually the show will be going to just YouTube on the 6th. We're going to launch a brand new channel. We're going to have a big old kickoff show for it. So it won't change, but we're doing the same thing. Our formats might change. We're gonna try to make it a little bit more spicy for everybody. You know, we've been getting a lot of good feedback on the show, and we just want to Yeah, thankfully, it's been awesome, and you guys have really been pushing us to do more and dress it up a little bit more and give it a little bit. I don't want to say professional look because it's not a professional show; it's just a
Not
fun
one
show.
bit.
But
Yeah,
we're gonna make it visually look kind of cool. So
we're gonna fake the funk.
yeah, that's exactly what we're gonna do. So be on the lookout for that. November 6th, gonna be a big old kickoff show, and I invite anybody that's liked our channels to go like this channel and bring all your support and loyalty to that one. So long-winded story. That's what's coming up in the future. But till then, you're gonna still see our sexy faces and all our fun guests, and we're gonna have a badass time. So yeah, that's it. Sean, where can we find you, brother? And your Christmas lights.
Google me. Twitter, Sean
Sounds
Ahrendt.
sexy.
Facebook, Sean Ahrendt. Yeah. Instagram and YouTube, Sean Ahrendt. Across the board. And you might find some pretty awful shit, but I'm sorry. Joe, where are you?
Same thing. Joe M. Sonntag and any of the social media, you can find me. Just type my name in. Like we said before, we all have YouTube channels. Find us on YouTube. Give us a subscribe and a like. If you're watching on Facebook right now, please go to our Sean's channel. Man, I did it. I fucked it up. Sean's channel, my channel. Give us a like and subscribe. Carl, you have a channel on YouTube?
I do, but it's all just like videos of me drawing. Not really
That's
talking
even
too
better.
much.
Like,
Those are my-
subscribe, and hit notifications so he
Yep.
does more videos in the future, and they're awesome.
I gotta get better at that. Thanks, guys.
Dude, those are my favorite kind of videos. I would much rather
Yeah.
watch somebody draw than talk, So I'm down. I'm gonna go subscribe because I didn't know you had a channel. I'm gonna go do that as soon as we get off here. So, all right, everybody. Carl, stick around for a second before I'm gonna end the show and we'll wrap things up. Then we'll get off. But next week,
We have Mighty Marat Michaels.
that's
Look at
right.
me, pulling
Well,
the
I'm
friendship
tuning in
cards.
for that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Asking
Throwing the
everybody.
friend cards down.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're just having this. So over the last, let's say, this last 4 weeks or so, with the exception of Ken Hunt, I think we're having a very extreme studio alumni run here. So that's kind of cool. We had Dan Fraga on 2 weeks ago, and Karl, or Marat. So that's gonna be fun, man. We can talk. We're gonna dive into some extreme stories because
I'm gonna try to get Norm. I'm gonna try to
Oh,
get
that's a
Norm.
good one.
I
Yeah, I want to see if I can pull that.
I'm gonna put that on you. All right, everybody, you heard it first. Sean's gonna try to do it. Yeah. All right,
He's like,
everyone.
who the hell are these guys? I got bad shit.
All right, everybody.
All right.
Thank you to Carl for being on. Have a great weekend. Be safe out there, and we will see you next Friday.
Another
Peace, everyone, on the Ahrendt Stuff Show.